They say respect is earned, not given. But what if you could forge a mindset so solid, so unshakable, that respect becomes automatic? That silence follows your presence, not because you demand it, but because your discipline speaks louder than noise. This isn't about motivation. This is about transformation. This is about building mental toughness, not to impress others, but to become someone who no longer needs their validation. That's what an unbreakable mindset does. It frees you from the exhausting cycle of approval. Every time you react emotionally, you surrender your power. Every time you chase applause, you lose your identity. But when you control your thoughts, your actions, and your inner dialogue, you stop being a puppet. You start becoming a presence. Today, we're going to break down exactly how to forge a mindset that commands respect and silences critics. Not with theory, but with proven habits, ones rooted in a Stoic mindset, emotional self-control, and daily discipline. If you're ready to stop chasing and start becoming, this is your roadmap. This is about mental strength training for men who are done being soft, done being reactive, and ready to operate with purpose. You don't need more motivation, you need a system. And that's what you're about to get. If this message hits you, like this video, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear this today. Because the world doesn't need more noise, it needs more men who are unbreakable. 1. Shrink your world to what you truly command. Every man reaches a breaking point, the moment when he realizes he's wasting energy fighting battles that were never his to win. It starts small. You obsess over what others think. You replay conversations, read into tone, and try to control outcomes. You check your phone like it's a mirror for your worth. You work hard, hoping for recognition, but deep down, you feel it. You're giving away your power. Not because you're weak, because your focus is scattered. We've been sold a lie. That real strength comes from controlling everything. Your image, your results, your environment. But that's not a strength. That's mental slavery disguised as ambition. The truth is, your world becomes unbreakable the moment you narrow it down to what's actually yours. And that list is short: your thoughts, your decisions, your actions. That's it. Think of your mind as a fortress, not a public square, not a stage, a place with solid walls. The more you try to control the opinions of others, the chaos of the world, or the decisions of people you don't own, you're knocking holes into your own defenses. You let the world in, and it crushes you. But when you reclaim your walls and seal them shut, something powerful happens. Calm returns. Energy concentrates. Focus sharpens. You stop flinching at criticism. You stop negotiating your peace. A Stoic doesn't waste time on forecasts, gossip, or the behavior of fools. He invests that time in mastering his own code. That's why the Stoic mindset isn't soft, it's surgical. It doesn't avoid life. It simplifies life down to what can be governed and ruthlessly eliminates everything else. Right now, write down every major stressor in your life. Then draw a line through anything you can't directly control. Weather, markets, opinions, timing. Draw a line through all of it. Now look at what remains: how you think, what you decide, and how you respond. That's your kingdom. Guard it, rule it, expand it slowly, but never surrender it chasing what isn't yours. The reason most men never earn respect is that they're always reaching outside their zone, always proving, always reacting. But the man who only plays within his true domain becomes undeniable. Because he doesn't need applause to know his value. He doesn't need silence from others to hear his own clarity. His fortress is quiet because it is built on certainty. And critics, they lose their power the moment you stop trying to win them. They fall silent not because you crushed them, but because you outgrew the need for them to exist. So today, shrink your world. Not out of fear, but out of focus. Not to hide, but to forge. Take back your power, word by word, choice by choice. Because the smaller your circle of control, the stronger your mindset becomes. And that's where Unbreakable begins. 2. Train the no-reaction reflex. Daily anger feels powerful, but it's a lie. Reactivity pretends to be strength, but in reality, it's surrender in disguise. Every time you lash out, defend yourself compulsively, or lose composure when someone disrespects you, you give them a lever to pull. You hand over your control like it's spare change. And the moment you do that, you are no longer the man in command. You are the man being played. Modern masculinity is wired for reaction. We're trained to snap, to prove, to fight back. But that's not power. That's programming. The truth is, the most powerful man in the room is the one who says nothing because he doesn't need to. The man who doesn't flinch under criticism, who doesn't defend himself at every jab, radiates something terrifying. He's not in survival mode. He's in control. Imagine a storm hitting a mountain. The storm rages. The mountain doesn't respond. That's the image. That's the aim. You become immovable not by being passive, but by mastering your inner response system so deeply that no one else has access to your buttons. A Stoic doesn't react. He responds. And only when necessary. That difference between reaction and response is where self-respect is born. It's the mental muscle that silences critics before they finish their sentence. It's the edge that separates the impulsive from the unshakable. The man who pauses before speaking, who breathes instead of bursting, who waits instead of attacking, he owns the moment. Everyone else is chasing it. You can build this reflex like a warrior trains with a blade, daily, deliberately, with tension and repetition. Each time you're provoked, that's your drill. When someone disrespects you, pause. Ask yourself, does this deserve a reaction, or am I being pulled into their storm? If it's not in your circle of control, release it. Not because you're weak, but because you refuse to bleed energy for free. Picture every reaction you didn't manage last year, the arguments, the text messages, the spirals in your mind. What did they give you? Nothing. They cost you time, peace, presence, and maybe respect. Now flip the script. Picture yourself in those same situations, but quiet, calm, eyes steady, no defense, no justification. That is the man no one forgets, not because he yelled the loudest, but because he didn't need to. Train yourself not to flinch. Create space between the trigger and response. Let your stillness become your sword. You don't need to win every exchange. You only need to show without saying that you're not in the game, that you've outgrown it. Because the man who doesn't react owns the frame. The man who doesn't defend himself cannot be attacked. And the man who chooses silence over impulse isn't passive, he's powerful. Build that reflex. Sharpen it. Practice it when no one is watching. Because the next time someone tries to provoke you, you won't need to rise. You'll already be above it. 3. Say no without explaining why. An unbreakable mindset isn't forged in applause. It's forged in boundaries, sharp, unapologetic, immovable. And nothing defines that boundary more than the word no. Not the passive no that comes with excuses. Not the polite no soaked in guilt. The firm, direct no that stands alone without justification. That word is a blade. Used right, it separates the man who owns his integrity from the man being rented out by everyone else's expectations. The benefit is quiet, but undeniable. Every no you say to what doesn't align with your core frees energy for what does. Every no to someone else's agenda is a yes to your own code. Saying no is not rejection, it's self-direction. When you master this habit, your decisions get sharper, your presence gets clearer, and the people who used to manipulate your guilt, your politeness, your need to be liked, they lose access to you. That's why the man who can say no without needing to explain himself is dangerous. He doesn't just protect his time, he protects his values. And values enforced are the backbone of respect. That's when critics start backing off. Not because you silence them, but because you stop negotiating who you are. The modern world demands constant yeses. Be flexible, be agreeable, don't rock the boat. But the Stoic doesn't bend for applause. He bends for nothing. He understands that freedom isn't found in pleasing others, it's found in staying true when it's inconvenient. That kind of consistency isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself, but it makes people listen. Imagine a battlefield general. Every yes risks a troop, every no draws the line. That's how you have to think. Because when you keep saying yes to things that go against your instincts, social events, obligations, favors that drain you, you become your own traitor. Slowly, your discipline leaks, your clarity fades, and your resentment builds. You don't lose control in one moment, you lose it one yes at a time. Here's the shift. Starting today, stop padding your refusals with explanations. If you don't want to go, say no. If it doesn't align with your mission, say no. If it doesn't feel right, say no. Not no, I'm sorry, not maybe next time, just no. That silence after your refusal, that's your power echoing back. This doesn't make you cruel, It makes you anchored. And in a culture that bows to approval, being anchored makes you unforgettable. Men aren't judged by how many things they say yes to. They're judged by what they refuse to compromise on. And when your boundaries are clean, sharp, and enforced without guilt, people stop pushing. They adjust. You don't need to convince anyone why your line is where it is. Draw it. Hold it. Live by it. Because the man who protects his no is the man who truly respects his yes. That's how strength looks in the quiet. That's how critics go silent. Not because you shouted louder, but because you made it clear they don't have access to you. 4. Sit in silence until you feel whole again. Noise is the new addiction. We wake up to notifications, scroll through opinions, fill silence with voices that don't know us, and worse, shape us. Somewhere along the way, men started confusing stimulation with strength. Constant input became the default. But what happens when the world goes quiet? When the screen fades and it's just you, alone with your thoughts? That's where most men flinch. That's where they discover they've built their entire identity around distraction. But silence doesn't expose weakness, it reveals it. And that's why it's sacred. Because the man who can sit with his thoughts, without needing validation, noise, or motion, is the man who has trained himself to no longer run. He faces himself, and from that stillness, something dangerous emerges: clarity. And clarity, in a chaotic world, is dominance. You want to forge an unbreakable mindset? Start here, not in a gym, not in an argument, not in a seminar. Start by removing all stimuli for 15 minutes a day. Sit alone, no phone, no background music, no agenda. Just breathe, listen, and observe the mental noise you've been avoiding. It will be loud at first: regret, comparison, fear, the echoes of criticism. But that's the point. You're not sitting in silence to feel peaceful. You're sitting in silence to make peace with the war within. Weak minds crave stimulation because they fear what quiet will reveal. Strong minds train in solitude because they understand that's where mental toughness is born. Stoics knew this. Marcus Aurelius didn't need an audience to write truth that outlived empires. He wrote alone, in silence, in darkness. Because clarity doesn't come from the crowd, it comes from compression. The fewer the distractions, the sharper your thoughts. The stiller your mind, the stronger your presence. Most men today walk into rooms carrying chaos in their heads and wondering why no one respects them. But respect is a byproduct of presence. And presence is built in silence, not in reaction. When you train yourself to be alone with stillness and not just survive it, but prefer it, you unlock a kind of emotional self-control that can't be faked. You no longer seek attention. You no longer fear boredom. You begin to broadcast something few people understand, but everyone feels: power without noise. Think of it like forging steel: heat, pressure, stillness. Without stillness, the shape is unstable. Without silence, your mindset is brittle. You can speak powerfully only after you've learned to think quietly. You can walk into conflict calmly only after you've spent time alone mastering your breath. You can command respect without words only if you've silenced the war between self-doubt and self-trust. So start today. Close the door. Sit down. No input, just you. It won't be easy, but that's why it works. Because every man can talk tough, but only a few are willing to sit in silence and face what's true. And when you can do that, daily without flinching, you don't just build discipline. You build presence. And presence doesn't need to shout. It changes the room without making a sound. 5. Turn every attack into a mental sparring match. Most men respond to criticism the same way they'd react to a punch: flinch, defend, fire back. You've seen it 100 times. Someone disrespects you, and you launch into a monologue, over-explaining your worth to someone who never asked for truth, only weakness. Or worse, you explode. You react loudly, fast, and emotionally. You give the critic exactly what they came for: proof that they can reach inside you and twist something. That's not a strength. That's submission wearing a mask of aggression. Others choose silence, but not the kind that commands presence. They go silent to suppress. They swallow the insult, hold their breath, and wear a false smile while quietly drowning in resentment. That, too, is not a strength. That's self-erasure. When you suppress instead of respond with clarity, you allow the wound to stay open. The critic doesn't even need to return. You replay them in your head for days, fueling their voice with your silence. Neither reaction is powerful. Both are predictable. And anything predictable is vulnerable. But imagine this instead. Someone attacks and you stay still. Not frozen, not faking calm, truly composed. Your eyes don't shift. Your breath stays slow. You don't fire back. You don't shrink. You let their chaos crash against the surface of a mind that's already been tempered in fire. That's what it means to turn every attack into a mental sparring match. It means training your reactions like a fighter trains defense. Not to strike harder, but to never be caught off guard. A Stoic man doesn't take every jab personally. He sees through the noise. He knows when an insult is just a reflection of the speaker's own weakness. He filters the world like a warrior filters wind. Some things pass, others hit, but only because he lets them. His calm isn't passive, it's calculated. And critics hate what they can't shake. They hate the man who doesn't flinch because he reveals the instability in them. Silence in this case isn't absence. Its presence is so powerful it can't be moved. You don't build this reflex overnight. You build it by seeing every moment of confrontation as a training ground. Every insult becomes a rep. Every accusation becomes a drill. And like a boxer who lets the opponent throw combinations just to practice head movement, you invite the pressure, not to be hurt, but to sharpen timing, precision, and poise. That's the unbreakable mindset. One that sees conflict not as danger, but as preparation. One that uses every enemy as an opportunity to build a deeper self-command. So the next time someone tries to bait you, don't react. Don't vanish either. Stay there. Let it land. Watch how they wait for you to collapse. And when you don't, when you just breathe and look back with a grounded mind, you win the only battle that matters, the one over yourself. Because in the end, the man who never gets pulled into someone else's storm becomes the one everyone fears to confront. Not because he's ruthless, but because he's unshakable. 6. Act once a day like no one's watching, because they aren't. Who are you when the lights are off? When there's no camera, no one to impress, no audience to clap or comment? Strip away the performance, the likes, the pressure to be seen, and what's left? That's not a rhetorical question. That's the mirror every man avoids, because it forces a brutal truth. You don't rise to your best self when people are watching. You rise when no one is. The modern man has become addicted to visibility. He's conditioned to move only when there's attention, to act only when there's a return. Discipline becomes public. Integrity becomes conditional. Effort becomes transactional. But that mindset isn't unbreakable, it's dependent. And anything dependent can be controlled, manipulated, or cracked under pressure. That's not power. That's performance under surveillance. To build a mindset that commands respect and silences critics, you have to flip the equation. You don't do things because someone's watching. You do them because you've chosen a standard. You train when no one's counting reps. You keep your word when no one's around to check. You do the right thing, even when the only person who'll ever know is you. That's what forges mental strength, not applause, not external validation. Repetition of principle, when no one sees, when no one praises, when no one claps. The Stoics knew this well. They spoke of the inner citadel, the place inside a man where nothing false can enter. But that place isn't built in noise. It's constructed in silence, layered brick by brick with small, unseen acts. One kept promise, one resisted temptation, one hard choice made in private. Those aren't small. They're the foundation. They're what separates a man whose discipline is for show from the one whose discipline is identity. Most people only act when someone else is watching, and they wonder why they feel hollow. But you, if you want to be unbreakable, you must build proof for yourself, not for your followers, not for your boss, not for your reputation, for your own inner ledger. Because confidence built on witnesses is fragile, but confidence built in isolation, that's permanent. It survives critics because it doesn't rely on silence. It radiates from integrity. So today, choose one thing. One small, clear action that aligns with your highest values. And do it with no announcement. Don't post about it. Don't tell your friends. Don't log it. Do it for one reason. Because it's right. Because it's yours. That action, silent, intentional, uncelebrated, is a weapon. It's a strike against the version of you that needs to be seen to feel valid. You want to silence critics? Live in a way that even if they shouted, their words wouldn't touch you. Why? Because your respect doesn't come from them. It comes from the man you meet in the mirror when no one else is around. Train that man. Discipline that man. Honor that man, because in the end, that's the only voice that won't fade. And the only audience that ever mattered. 7. Visualize crisis until calm becomes your default. You don't rise under pressure. You default to your preparation. That's the brutal truth. When tension strikes, when the deal collapses, when the insult hits, when the unexpected derails your plan, you don't become a different man. You become the man you've trained to be. And most men, if they're honest, haven't trained at all. They rely on willpower and wishful thinking. But willpower breaks, and hope without structure dissolves under fire. That's where visualization becomes a weapon. Not the soft kind that sells fantasy, but the tactical kind that Stoics use to prepare their minds for war, betrayal, and death. Mental strength isn't built in the comfort zone. It's built on the rehearsal of discomfort. The mind you program in silence is the one that steps forward in chaos. And if you haven't rehearsed how to respond, you'll react. You'll flinch, panic, rage, or freeze. And in that moment, you lose the frame. You lose presence. You lose power. But imagine this. Before your day begins, you sit still and construct adversity. You build the blow before it lands. You visualize failure before it arrives. You see yourself getting disrespected in a meeting and you don't defend. You get blindsided by bad news and you stay composed. You walk into conflict, not tense but grounded. That's not pessimism. That's Stoic clarity. That's training your nervous system to remain stable in the face of impact. And it's not just morning preparation. The night is part of the forge. Before bed, run 3 crisis scenarios. Not to worry, but to wire. Run them with breath, with posture, with detail. Feel the adrenaline spike and train yourself to meet it with calm. When you do this often enough, your brain builds new pathways. You don't just imagine strength, you practice it, you become it. And when the crisis actually comes, you don't panic. You've already been here. You've walked this room in silence. You know the exits. You own the moment. Most men overthink because they never train their thinking under fire. But you, if you build this habit, you don't get pulled into spirals. You become the calm center others orbit around. You don't break into reaction. You respond with direction, because you've practiced stillness in the eye of the imagined storm. Now you're unshaken in the real one. The Stoics didn't seek hardship, but they rehearsed it. They visualized their own deaths not to be morbid, but to eliminate fear. They meditated on loss to sharpen appreciation and resilience. They knew that clarity comes not from avoiding pain, but from preparing for it. That's not emotional self-help. That's emotional control forged through mental strength training. So tomorrow morning, before the world comes for your attention, take 10 minutes and script your storm. Walk through it without flinching. Feel your breath deepen, your thoughts stay clean. Then step into the day, not hoping it goes smoothly, but ready if it doesn't, because the man who has already lived the chaos in his mind walks calmly when others crumble. And that calm isn't luck. It's strategy. It's control. It's earned. 8. Build a personal code and make it your law. Every man has a code. The question is, was it built with intention or borrowed through survival? In a world that constantly shifts its rules, a man without a personal standard becomes reactive, inconsistent, and forgettable. He moves according to moods, crowds, and consequences. But the man with a clear code? He's different. He doesn't need to ask for directions because he's already set it. He doesn't need to chase approval because his identity isn't for sale. And when critics try to provoke him, they don't find weakness, they find a wall. To forge an unbreakable mindset, you need more than raw toughness. You need alignment, internal order. And that doesn't happen by accident. It happens when you define the 5 laws you live by, your non-negotiables. Not the ones you post about, not the ones you quote when it's convenient, but the ones you enforce, especially when no one's watching and everything is at stake. Most people adjust their standards depending on how the room feels. That's how reputations collapse. That's how guilt creeps in. You act one way at work, another with friends, and yet another when you're alone. But a Stoic mind doesn't split like that. It operates on one code across all conditions, calm or crisis, public or private. That kind of consistency isn't common. That's why it commands respect and silences critics, because it doesn't leave openings. Picture a battlefield general who doesn't rely on feelings. He relies on his map, his mission, and his rules of engagement. When chaos erupts, he doesn't panic. He checks against his code. That's the model. You're not leading armies, but you're leading yourself through conflict, pressure, and distraction. And if you don't have a code, you will default to impulse. And impulse is the fastest way to inconsistency, and inconsistency is the fastest way to lose respect. So what does this look like in real life? Start today by writing 5 principles that you will not bend, no matter the emotion, the situation, or the temptation. For example, speak only when it adds value. Decide fast, regret nothing. Never trade respect for attention. These don't have to impress anyone, they have to anchor you. Because when you walk into a room, already clear on who you are, the world adjusts to you. The Stoics understood this deeply. Marcus Aurelius called it living according to nature. Epictetus called it keeping your will in harmony with your role. In modern terms, know what you stand for and act like it. Not occasionally, always. That's what turns daily actions into character. That's what makes silence powerful and presence unforgettable. So write your code. Filter every decision through it. Sharpen it over time. Let it cut through confusion, temptation, and noise. Because when your decisions aren't up for negotiation, neither is your mindset. And when you live by law, not by feeling, you don't just become respected, you become unshakable. And no critic, no failure, no storm can reach you where your code lives. What you've just heard isn't a motivational speech. It's a framework, a blueprint for forging an unbreakable mindset, one that doesn't just survive pressure but grows stronger beneath it. Every man wants respect, but few are willing to earn it through silence, consistency, and emotional self-control. Now you know exactly how. By shrinking your focus to what you control, mastering your reactions, saying no without guilt, sitting in silence until you feel whole, treating every criticism as a training ground, doing the right thing when no one watches, visualizing storms before they hit, and living by a personal code that can't be shaken. This isn't a one-time fix, it's a discipline, and discipline isn't loud. It's done in the dark, away from applause, built one small decision at a time. But the payoff is unmatched. Inner peace, personal integrity, and a kind of presence that silences critics before they speak. Because when your mindset is unbreakable, you stop chasing validation. You stop reacting to every jab. You simply live. Strong, grounded, respected. So here's your next move. Don't just nod and scroll. Pick one of the habits from this video. Just one. Practice it today and again tomorrow. Let it reshape how you think, how you act, and how you lead yourself. Because this is what true mental toughness looks like. Daily action, not noise. Now I want to hear from you. Which part hit hardest? Which habit are you committing to build first? Share it in the comments. Your story might help someone else rise too. Forge forward. Stay grounded. Build daily. That's how you earn real respect. That's how you become unbreakable. And no one, not even your worst critic, can take that from you.